The grand chamber of the Galactic Predator Council was, as always, a spectacle of evolutionary one-upmanship. Creatures with more teeth than sense lounged on biosynthetic furniture specially designed to accommodate spines, tails, and the occasional venomous appendage. The air recyclers worked overtime to handle the mixture of pheromones, each species attempting to subtly dominate the atmosphere. Commander Vrax of the Karathi Dominion, 7 feet of scaled muscle topped with a crest that changed colors based on his mood, currently displayed a nauseating mixture of orange-yellow anxiety as he took his seat at the circular table. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a nervous habit he developed after 30 cycles as a frontline commander. "Let's cut through the ceremonial waste products," growled High General Maud Kesh, a bulky ursine whose species had evolved to hunt in methane storms. "We're here because we've lost 12 outposts in the Orion Spur to these humans." The word caused a ripple of discomfort among the assembled predators. 12 outposts against a species that doesn't even have proper claws, chittered Representative Zilks, whose mantis-like form trembled with either fear or rage. With Zilks, it was always hard to tell. "They're not supposed to be a threat," said Admiral Frosk, sliding a collection of data crystals across the polished obsidian table. "Their planet is 70% water. Their bodies are 60% water. They're practically walking soup containers. Walking soup containers that somehow decimated the Vornax battle fleet." Vrax finally spoke, his voice deliberately steady despite his telltale crest. "I was there at the Proxima engagement. I saw what they did." The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew about Proxima. The word had entered Predator languages as a synonym for catastrophe. "Commander Vrax," said Maud Kesh, his claws clicking against the table. "You're the only senior officer who survived direct contact with them. That's why you're here. We need to understand what we're facing." "What we're facing," Vrax replied, "is something evolution never prepared us for. The humans don't make sense. They're contradictions wrapped in thin, terrible skin." "We've all read the biological reports," Zilks interrupted. "No significant natural weapons. No armor, but poor sensory capabilities." "And yet," Vrax's crest shifted to a deep purple, "they've taken every single world we've challenged them for. They've adapted faster than species with dedicated mutation chambers. And worst of all," he paused, looking around at his fellow apex predators, genuine fear in all 4 eyes. "They have Marines." The entire council flinched as if physically struck. "Don't say that word," hissed Maud Kesh. "Not here. Not after what happened at Proxima." "We need to say it," Vrax insisted, his voice hardening. "We need to understand it. I've been authorized to tell you exactly what happened at Proxima, and why we need the M-word protocol. 2. The incident. The memory of Proxima Centauri's 3rd moon still lingered like necrotic tissue in Vrax's mind. Their first major engagement with the humans had been approached with the casual confidence of apex predators encountering a new prey species. They call their vessel the Yonez Dauntless, Tactical Officer Kizan had reported, his tendrils vibrating with anticipation. Primitive reaction drives, minimal shield technology. The hull is primarily aluminum alloy with carbon composite reinforcement. "So they've built a flying snack container," Fleet Commander Zox Gruul had replied, causing ripples of predatory laughter across the bridge. How thoughtful of them to deliver themselves. Eggs. Then a mere strike commander had been less amused. "The intelligence reports suggest caution, Fleet Commander. These humans have a disproportionate amount of military history for a species their age." Military history against themselves. Zox Gruul had dismissed with a casual flick of his primary combat limb. "They've never faced a true predator species. Their bodies are so delicate, they've evolved on a low-gravity world with minimal atmospheric toxins." "They're barely out of their cradle," agreed Kizan. "This diplomatic delegation is clearly a scouting mission. We should consume them now, while they're vulnerable." The Vornax battle fleet, 12 battlecruisers, each carrying a complement of 5,000 warriors, had surrounded the single human vessel. The comms officer had opened a channel, and the predators had salivated at their first sight of humans. They were pathetic. Smooth-skinned, with no visible natural weapons, small, flat teeth that couldn't tear through proper hide. Their captain, a female called Garcia, had attempted diplomacy. "This is Captain Elena Garcia of the United Nations ship Dauntless. We come in peace, seeking dialogue between our species." Zoxgrul had laughed, a sound like grinding rocks. "We acknowledge your surrender. Food, prepare to be boarded and processed." The human's face had shown confusion rather than fear. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding. We're not surrendering. We're offering peaceful contact, perhaps our translators." "There is no misunderstanding," Zoxgrul had interrupted. "Your species is weak. You are prey. We are predators. This is the natural order." The human captain's expression had changed then, not to terror as expected, but to something predators rarely saw: cold calculation. "I see," she had said simply. "In that case, I need to inform you that this ship carries a contingent of United States Marines, and they have authorization to respond to hostile action." No one had understood the significance of those words. No one knew what Marines meant. The boarding had begun. 5,000 Vornax warriors against a single human ship with a crew of just over 300. It should have been a simple harvesting operation. 6 hours later, Vrax found himself in an escape pod, one of only 17 survivors of the entire fleet. The humans had not pursued the retreating pods. They hadn't needed to. The message had been sent. The destruction of the battle fleet had been methodical. The humans had let the Vornax board, then sealed compartments, manipulated atmospheric conditions, and engaged in what they later learned was called close-quarters combat. The Vornax, used to overwhelming prey with superior strength and natural weapons, had been systematically eliminated by humans using small, handheld weapons and, most terrifyingly, at their bodies in directly applied violence. The boarding recordings, recovered from the escape pods, had become classified at the highest level. They showed humans, particularly those wearing a specific uniform and bearing a specific insignia, fighting with a savagery that defied their biological limitations. They didn't flee from pain. They advanced toward threats. They communicated in short, cryptic phrases and moved with coordinated precision that spoke of endless practice. The ones they called Marines, Vrax concluded, addressing the now silent council, killed at a ratio of 83 to 1. "We lost 5,000 warriors. They lost 60 personnel, most of them in the initial boarding action before they organized their response." "Impossible," whispered Zilks. "No prey species could." "That's exactly the problem," Vrax cut in. "They're not prey. They're not predators in any way we understand. They're something else entirely." 3. The investigation. After the council meeting, Vrax had been granted extraordinary resources for his investigation. The mandate was clear: discover what Marines were, why they were so effective, and how to neutralize them. His first step had been infiltration. Through a series of black market contacts, he'd acquired a modified chromatophore skin, an expensive piece of biotech that allowed him to approximate human appearance, with his skeletal structure concealed beneath the disguise, and a voice modulator to handle human speech patterns. He'd managed to secure passage to Earth as a researcher from one of the neutral species. Earth itself had been the first shock. The humans lived in an environment of such variety that it defied evolutionary sense. They thrived in deserts and tundras, mountains and oceans, sometimes traveling between entirely different biomes in a single day. Their cities were chaotic arrangements of architecture that paid little attention to defensive positioning or spatial efficiency. But it was their media that provided the real breakthrough. Humans documented everything: their history, their conflicts, their military operations. They made entertainment about their wars, retelling the stories with such detail that Vrax wondered if they were sending coded training messages to their young. In a place called a library, Vrax had discovered texts dating back hundreds of Earth years describing these Marines. The oldest reference he could find was to something called the Continental Marines, established in 1775 by their calendar. The records described them as soldiers of the sea, a concept no sensible predator species would ever consider. Predator evolution was specific and specialized, species adapted to hunt in particular environments, developing weapons and strategies for those conditions. The idea of taking a land fighting force and adapting it for water combat was ridiculous. Except the humans had done exactly that, and then they'd kept going. For 3 Earth months, Vrax had immersed himself in human military history, focusing on their Marines. He'd watched documentaries about places called Iwo Jima, Chosin Reservoir, Fallujah, and New Kabul. He'd read accounts of something called island hopping in a conflict they named World War A. He'd studied their training methods, their weapons, their organizational structure. Each new piece of information had increased his sense of dread. The humans didn't just train their Marines to fight, they rebuilt them from psychological foundations. They broke them down in something called boot camp and reconstructed them into creatures that could function in environments that would kill ordinary humans. The most disturbing discovery had come during an information-gathering mission to a place called Paris Island. Disguised as a civilian contractor, Vrax had witnessed young humans, barely adults by their own standards, being systematically transformed through ritualized hardship. These recruits aren't even their warriors yet, he'd recorded in his secure journal. They're proto-marines, undergoing metamorphosis. But unlike our species, whose metamorphosis is biological and predetermined, theirs is psychological and chosen. They volunteer for this. Vrax had nearly compromised his cover when he'd witnessed the training exercise they called the Crucible, a 54-hour ordeal of minimal sleep, limited food, and constant physical exertion. His predator instincts had screamed that this was the perfect time to attack these humans when they were at their weakest. But that was exactly the point. The humans were deliberately creating adversity, training themselves to function when biology said they should collapse. We've been approaching this wrong, Vrax realized during his final report transmission. We keep thinking they must have some hidden biological advantage. They don't. They've culturally evolved beyond their biology. Their Marines aren't following natural programming, they're overriding it. 4. The revelation. Vrax stood before the council again, his crest a steady blue of controlled emotion as he presented his findings. The fundamental problem, he began, is that we've been evaluating humans by predator standards. We look at their bodies and see weakness. We should be looking at their minds and seeing danger. He activated the chamber's holographic system, displaying an anatomical comparison between a Karathi warrior and a human Marine. The average Karathi has 5 times the muscle density, protective scales rated at 4 on the Mowas hardness scale, redundant vital organs, skin and claws that can shear through standard hull plating. The average human Marine has skin, fragile bones and exposed vital systems with no redundancy. He switched to footage captured during the Proxima engagement, a human Marine, bloodied but functional, charging toward a Vornax warrior twice his size. Our biology evolved for immediate overwhelming force. Ambush, kill, feed. It's efficient, it's logical. The humans, he paused, searching for the right words, but they evolved for persistence. Their entire physiological advantage is that they don't stop. They can sustain moderate effort for incredible durations. On their homeworld, before they had technology, they would chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. Zilks chittered in disbelief. That's not a viable hunting strategy. And yet, it worked for them. They call it persistence hunting. Now apply that same concept to warfare. Vrax displayed a series of historical combat footage. Marines trained specifically to operate beyond normal human biological limitations. They routinely carry up to 60% of their body weight in equipment, march for days with minimal rest, and function in environmental conditions that would kill unprotected humans. Brandways. So they've adapted to overcome their weak biology, growled Mordkesh. That still doesn't explain how they defeated superior opponents. Because we keep thinking strength determines victory. Vrax replied, it doesn't. Not against humans. Their Marines operate on a principle they call adaptive aggression. They don't fight the way their biology dictates, they fight the way that works against specific opponents. He displayed footage from the Proxima engagement, showing Marines adjusting their tactics mid-battle after encountering the first Vornax warriors. They studied our strengths in real time and adapted to exploit weaknesses we didn't even know we had. They used our own biology against us. Fornak's warriors have superior night vision, but are vulnerable to high-frequency sound. The Marines discovered this within minutes and repurposed communication equipment to emit debilitating tones. "And their casualties?" asked Admiral Frosk. "That's the most disturbing part," Vrax said quietly. "They expect them. They plan for them. Their tactical doctrine assumes losses and continues functioning. We retreat when we take 10% casualties, because that's the rational response. They've continued fighting after losing 90% of their forces." The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. "There's more," Vrax continued. "Their Marines have a saying, 'Every Marine is a rifleman.' It means that regardless of their specific function, they all maintain basic combat capabilities. Their engineers can fight. Their medics can fight. Even their data specialists can fight. So how do we defeat them?" demanded Mordkesh. "That's the problem." Vrax's crest flickered to yellow briefly. "We've been thinking about this as a tactical problem. It's not. It's an evolutionary one, and they've got a 100,000-year head start on solving it." 5. The solution attempt. The Council had not taken Vrax's report well. Predator psychology was poorly equipped to handle the concept of an opponent that couldn't be intimidated by superior biology. "We will adapt," Mordkesh had declared. "If they can overcome their biology, we can enhance ours." Thus began Operation Apex, Override, a multi-species effort to develop countermeasures specifically targeted at human Marines. Vrax had been appointed strategic director, much to his private dismay. He'd argued for avoidance rather than confrontation, but Predator instincts ran deep. Their first approach had been biological enhancement. If Marines trained to exceed their limitations, the Predator Alliance would use advanced genetic modification to push even further beyond their already superior capabilities. The results had been disappointing. The test subjects had indeed become stronger, faster, and more lethal, but they'd also become less tactically flexible. Cognitive function had decreased as combat capability increased. They'd created perfect apex predators, only to discover that perfect predators made imperfect soldiers. "They're thinking about this differently than we are," Vrax had explained to an increasingly frustrated council. "Their Marines aren't trying to become apex predators. They're becoming something else entirely, a networked combat system that happens to consist of individual biological units." Their second approach had focused on technology. If they couldn't match the Marines' adaptive psychology, they would overwhelm them with superior weaponry. The Tarvos engagement had proven this approach equally flawed. The Predator Alliance had deployed a new battle group equipped with advanced weapons specifically designed to counter human tactics. The humans had responded by changing their tactics completely, abandoning conventional approaches for something they called asymmetric warfare. Rather than engage the Predator fleet directly, a small contingent of Marines had infiltrated the command vessel, captured its navigation systems, and systematically crashed 8 ships into each other before disappearing in the confusion. "They don't fight fair," Zilks had complained during the debriefing. "That's exactly the point," Vrax had replied. "They don't have the luxury of fighting fair. They evolved as a cooperative tribal species on a planet filled with predators. They learned early that survival matters more than honor." The third and final approach had been psychological warfare. If humans couldn't be defeated physically, perhaps they could be broken mentally. The Predator Alliance had deployed advanced metic attacks designed to exploit human psychological vulnerabilities. The humans had responded with something called memes of their own cultural information packets that spread rapidly through their communication networks. Within days of the first psychological operation, human communication channels had been filled with images mocking the Predator Alliance. The most popular showed a human Marine holding one of Vrax's species like a small domestic animal with text reading, "Who's the apex predator now?" After 3 failed approaches, Vrax had called an emergency council meeting. "We need to accept reality," he'd said, his crest a resolute blue. "We cannot defeat the Marines through conventional means. They've spent their entire evolutionary history surviving against unfavorable odds. It's not just what they do, it's what they are." "Then what do you propose?" Mordkesh had demanded. A complete paradigm shift, Vrax had answered. If we can't beat them, we need to avoid them. I propose the implementation of the N-word protocol. 6. Conclusion. The new protocol. One standard year after the Proxima incident, the N-word protocol had been fully implemented across all Predator Alliance territories. The directives were simple. 1. At the first confirmed detection of humans, determine if Marines are present. 2. If Marines are present, initiate immediate withdrawal to a minimum safe distance of 3 light years. 3. The term Marine is classified as a high-level psychological trigger word. All personnel must undergo conditioning to respond to this word with immediate disengagement protocols. Vrax stood in the observation deck of the Predator diplomatic vessel Evolutionary Apex, watching the approaching human ship. It had taken significant political maneuvering, but the Predator Alliance had finally agreed to formal diplomatic relations with the humans. Commander. His aide approached cautiously. The human delegation has docked. They're requesting permission to board. Composition? Vrax asked, his crest maintaining a carefully controlled blue. 12 diplomats, 4 technical specialists, and, the aide hesitated, a security detail. What kind of security detail? Vrax asked, already knowing the answer. Marines, sir. 8 of them. Vrax felt his crest involuntarily flicker to yellow before he regained control. Acknowledged. Implement N-word protocol security measures. All non-essential personnel are to withdraw to the secondary hull. Reminder to all staff, these humans are here peacefully. We will not provoke them. The diplomatic meeting proceeded with remarkable smoothness. The humans, for their part, seemed genuinely interested in peaceful relations. They spoke of trade, cultural exchange, and mutual defense agreements. Throughout the negotiations, Vrax couldn't help but notice the Marines stationed around the room. They stood perfectly still, their expressions neutral, their bodies relaxed, yet somehow coiled with potential energy. The other Predator delegates gave them a wide berth, their instincts warring with their diplomatic training. The humans, seemingly oblivious to the effect their protectors were having, continued discussing protein synthesis treaties and deuterium exchange rates. During a brief recess, Vrax overheard 2 Marines talking quietly in a corner. "Is it just me?" one said. "Or do these aliens seem really jumpy around us?" "Yeah, I noticed that too," the other replied. "The reptile guys practically jump out of their scales when we walk by. Maybe their translator is making us sound threatening. Who knows? Just stick to the Colonel's orders, smile, be polite, and try not to start an interstellar incident." "Roger that. Though I gotta say, diplomatic duty beats the hell out of orbital drops." They laughed, a sound that sent shivers down Vrax's spine despite his conditioning. Later, as the formal agreement was being prepared, the human ambassador Jenkins approached Vrax privately. "Commander, I wanted to thank you for your role in establishing these talks. I understand you've been an advocate for peaceful relations since the unfortunate Proxima misunderstanding. Survival often depends on recognizing superior adaptation." Vrax replied carefully. "Your species has much to teach ours." The ambassador smiled. "That's very progressive of you. Many of our own history's predator species took much longer to recognize the benefits of cooperation over competition." "You had predator species on Earth?" Vrax asked, genuinely curious. "Oh yes. Lions, tigers, bears, wolves, dozens of apex predators. Most are protected now, living in conservation areas. And how did your species manage to coexist with them?" Ambassador Jenkins shrugged. "We didn't always. For most of our history, we either avoided them or eliminated them when they threatened our communities. Eventually, we gained enough technological advantage that we could afford to protect them instead." The implications sent a chill through Vrax's core temperature regulation system. As the humans departed, Vrax watched from the observation deck again. The Marine security detail boarded last, moving with that distinctive controlled precision that haunted the dreams of Predator commanders across the galaxy. "Sir," his aide approached, Our intelligence division has compiled their report on the human diplomatic vessel. It's concerning. How so? Vrax asked. The ship is designated as the UNES diplomatic carrier Peaceful Overture. However, our scans indicate it's a modified Intrepid class assault carrier. It's currently carrying a complement of 48 Marines, not just the 8 who accompanied the delegation. Vrax's crest rippled with blue amusement, and of course it is. Sir, the humans aren't being deceptive, Lieutenant. They're being cautious, and sending us a message that we should be thankful they're choosing diplomacy. As the human ship disengaged and moved away from the Predator vessel, Vrax added a personal addendum to his final M-word protocol report. The greatest irony of our interaction with humans, he wrote, is that they remain largely unaware of the psychological effect they have on predator species. They don't understand that we see in their Marines something that evolution never prepared us for, prey that fights back, not just to survive, but to win. The M-word protocol isn't just about protection, it's about preservation of our understanding of the natural order, an order that humans, particularly their Marines, have thoroughly disrupted. He paused, considering his final words carefully. It is the recommendation of this officer that the Predator Alliance continue to pursue peaceful relations with humanity, not because we share common values or biological imperatives, but because the alternative is facing more of their Marines, and that is something no sensible predator should ever willingly choose. Somewhere in the vast emptiness of space, a human Marine Corps drill instructor was shouting at a recruit. Across the galaxy, predator species shuddered without knowing why. The natural order had changed. The galaxy had new apex predators now, and they didn't even have proper claws.